Okay, a couple last points here to finish up. So in the last uh, little few slides, we talked about the electron transport chain. And during that time, we saw how the electrons from glucose had been passed down a chain of proteins and were their energy was harvested. So here we go on this slide. We're showing these are the proteins, these blue blobs, and these are the ones that are embedded in the inner mitochondrial membrane. Here come the taxis full of electrons, NADH, and they are going to dump their electrons off with the first protein, and the protein is going to pass the electrons down the chain. They go. As they go, the energy gradually gets sucked out of the electrons. That's used to power those pumps to push the hydrogens and create the gradient. And at the very end, by the time the electrons are squeezed of their energy, oxygen comes along and takes them away in the form of water. But what we have going on here is something called redox reactions. We talked about redox reactions way back when we did our Benedict's test in lab, and they're coming back here again. So we're going to talk about what redox reactions are. So redox reactions, it stands for reduction oxidation reactions. And redox has to do with electrons being passed between molecules. And we have that little saying that we talked about. Leo the lion says, grr. This stands for loss of electrons is oxidation. Gaining electrons is reduction. So looking here, when this protein gives the electrons to this protein, this one's losing electrons, this one's gaining them. So this is getting oxidized, this is getting reduced. And then this protein gets oxidized and that one gets reduced when it gains the electrons. Then this one gets oxidized as it loses them again, and this one gets reduced as it gains them again. So this is a whole chain of redox, redox, redox going on one after the other. And as these reactions go on, the energy is sucked out of the electrons and the energy is used to create the ATP, which is the whole point of this cellular respiration process. So once again, these redox reactions are really important part of the electron transport chain. So this is an awesome animation. I love it. So let's spend some time dissecting what's going on here. We've got a phospholipid bilayer, which should look familiar. This is supposed to be the inner mitochondrial membrane. And then we have a big brown thing here spinning around. So thinking back as to what we've been talking about, what spins around? It's ATP synthase. So this is our ATP synthase enzyme. It's a giant protein. It's responsible for building ATP. And there's ATP, A, and then TP. This is where we start. Now it's ADP with a separate P, and now it's ATP. To make ATP, you have to put the third phosphate back on the chain, right? So that's ADP and P, and there's ATP. And off it goes to be used in the cell. Now what drives this thing to spin around is the movement of hydrogen ions through the center. So you can see these little white snowballs, that's what the hydrogen ions are. So let's wait for it to go through one more cycle here. We start off right here with a lot of hydrogen ions down here. The hydrogen ions want to escape, they want to go this way. And when they go through, they power the movement of the enzyme. So this is the intermembrane space where all the hydrogen ions build up. And this is the matrix where they are escaping out into. This is like the stadium. This is like the rest of the city when everyone leaves. All right. Now, what's interesting is on this diagram, it's flipped around than it was on the slide in the last set of slides. And that's because there's no up or down in a mitochondria. If you think about it, the mitochondria goes all the way around. Some places the intermembrane space is up, and in some places it's down. Either of those things can be true depending on how you draw your diagram. So I hope this helped. I really, really like this animation. I think it's very clear. Okay, so at the end of this whole shebang, you take one molecule of glucose, you completely disassemble it, you breathe out 6 CO2s, you harvest all the electrons. So here's all the electrons coming out, being harvested, put into taxes. These are all the taxes. And we put all those electrons into the ETS. And throughout this whole process, we end up with a total of about 36 ATPs. You make most of them at the end. About 32 to 34 of them are made at the very end in the ETS. through the ATP synthase enzyme. A few little ATPs are made in glycolysis, and a few ATPs come out of the citric acid cycle through some sort of different chemistry that happens. But that's very minor. Really, the big bang for your buck comes at the very end here, where the majority of the ATP is created. All right, so that's that. The last little presentation I'm going to do is on anaerobic respiration, but that's going to be in a different video.